Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaiya. In today's video, we're going to be talking about some metal and horror novels that I want to read this year in 2025. It's a brand new year, so everybody's got New Year's resolutions, whether that is to lose a little weight or add more vinyl to your collection or listen to more of the music that you actually own. Some people have a New Year's resolution where they want to listen to a new album every single day. I wanted to start that, but my New Year's resolution is to read more books. I think this one's also very popular for some people. So I wanted to kind of show you some of the metal specific books that I have, and then show you some horror thriller novels that I'm interested in reading this year. So we'll start with the metal picks. The first one is going to be the Scott Burns Sessions, A Life in Death Metal, 1987 to 1997. I've shown this on my channel a few times, and I'm obsessed with this book. As you can see, there's like tabs from like notes that I've taken, or just like interviews that I've taken notes from for some of my deep dives, specifically the Cannibal Corpse deep dive, which if you haven't seen, it's a two-part thing, but that took me a really long time to do. But yeah, I have just taken notes. I have a whole bookmark. I started to read this book like from start to finish, and I got to like the 26th page. But this book is basically all about Scott Burns's life and sessions working at Morrisound Studios. If you do not know who Scott Burns is, he's a legendary death metal producer. He literally has done some of the biggest death metal albums and just albums in general. Cannibal Corpse, Death, Sepultura, Deicide, Obituary, Atheist, 6 Feet Under, Pestilence, Massacre, Suffocation, Terrorizer, just to kind of give you an idea. So kind of talks about how he got into being a producer at Morrisound. So if you're interested in picking up this book, I paid $40 for this. I did pre-order it when it originally came out last year, I believe. So, yeah, it's a nice thick copy, as you can see. Really, really cool book. So if you're interested in knowing more about Scott Burns and the bands that he worked with, this is definitely the book for you. The next book I really want to read this year is The Legend of Kansai Hardcore by Isha, I think is how you pronounce his name. It looks like this. But this was a novel that is actually being sold on FOAD Records. I've talked about them significantly on my channel. Please go check out FOAD Records. It stands for F Often Die. But if you like Hell's Headbanger Records and you like what they do, FOAD is basically the exact same thing. They specialize a lot with just a lot of underground music. Specifically, what we pick up from there is a lot of like Japanese gore grind, hardcore, punk, black metal, that kind of thing, hence why we bought this book. So Kensai is a Japanese word that roughly means the neighborhood of the capital, so it implies the neighborhood of Osaka, Kyoto region of Japan. So this book is all about the hardcore punk scene in Japan. So I'm very excited about this because, as I said, we've really gotten into hardcore punk from Japan, and there's a lot of Japanese grindcore, gore grind bands. So I really want to learn more about how that genre came to be in the Japanese scene. The next book I'm interested in purchasing, I don't physically own yet, and I think I would have to like actually purchase the physical copy, but it is To Hell and Back Again, My Black Metal Story Part 1 by Varg Vikernes. I know I'm probably being booed by some of you, but this is a novel that was actually mentioned by Boris T, who, if you don't know his channel, you should definitely go check it out. He has a whole video about this book by Varg Vikernes, and yeah, this is obviously a book that is going to stir the pot a little bit. Varg is definitely a very polarizing figure, but this is just a book from Varg Vikernes's thoughts and voice himself, all about how he got into black metal and his life story and whatever else. And as it says, it's like my black metal story part 1. So I'm not even sure if he's done a part 2 or part 3 yet, but I am just interested in reading this just to see what he has to say, to see what his story is in his own perspective. The next one I want to read is called For the Sake of Heaviness, The History of Metal Blade Records. After doing my Cannibal Corpse deep dive, I was really interested in knowing more information about Metal Blade Records. I've been interested in a lot of other record labels and like kind of how they started, because some of them are so iconic for like the classic records that we know and love from the late 80s and the early 90s. So just kind of how labels got started, especially during the tape trading days, I feel like is so fascinating. I just want to know more information about how the label started, Brian Slagle's journey getting the label going, because, Cannibal Corpse and 6 Feet Under have been signed to them since the beginning, as well as the Black Dahlia murder. So that is really what interests me. The next book is called Doomed to Fail, The Incredibly Loud History of Doom, Sludge, and Post-Metal. This is written by JJ Ansalmi and Kat Jones. JJ Ansalmi covers some of the most iconic bands that started the genre, specifically Black Sabbath, Candlemass, I Hate God, and many more. So I think this book, as I said, with the other ones, would be an interesting read to kind of just learn more about these genres. Exploring other genres and kind of stepping out of my comfort zone is something that I'm trying to do more of this year as well. So my biggest interest in this book is knowing more information about these other genres that I haven't really dove into before. Next on my list is Iron Man, My Journey Through Heaven and Hell with Black Sabbath by Tony Iommi. I don't think that this needs much of an introduction because it's Tony Iommi, right? But this is like one of the only books I've really found on the internet that is specifically from Tony Iommi. If I'm going to read a music memoir, I want it to be straight from either the artist themselves or they're working with an author or somebody to kind of write it for them. The most fascinating part is, of course, the fact that, he lost the tips of like 2 of his fingers and he had to wear like the little rubber ends to help him play guitar, and it didn't hinder him. That disability did not hinder his ability to play and to master the guitar and continue to record songs and albums that were just so iconic. Like Heaven and Hell is one of my favorite songs of all time. And yeah, Tony Iommi. It literally does not need to get any more simple than that. The last metal book on my list is called Louder Than Hell, The Definitive Oral History of Metal. So like the Scott Burns Sessions novel and the Kanzai Hardcore novel, this book features over 250 interviews conducted by renowned journalists John Witherhorn and Catherine Turman. Yeah, this is just another example of another book where I can learn more about how these bands started, and it's more than just like one specific genre, like just post-metal or doom, but it's like, popular bands from nu metal to heavy metal and groove. I'm super into that stuff. I love music memoirs, and that is ultimately why I want to read this book. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of my horror novels, and I'm going to tell you right now, even though if you're not a fan of like horror or anything, one of the most fascinating things I have found is the extreme horror genre for books, especially if you go to like r/extreme horror on Reddit and you look at like the recommended books that they have for beginners. It is identical to what I have seen on like slam band covers, gore grind covers, and even some like grindcore and death metal. Like some of the most extreme like gory or disturbing like stuff is kind of on those extreme horror book covers, and that is the most interesting thing. And this next book is no different. It is called The Slob by Erin Beauregard. So this book is actually listed as a beginner novel for the extreme horror genre, and I bought it not really knowing that at first. So The Slob is basically about this woman, Vera, who when she was growing up, she basically lived in like a hoarder's house, from my understanding, and it was so gross that it was traumatizing for her. And as she's like pregnant with her first child, she basically decides to, I guess, start a cleaning business in the 80s, where she goes like door to door to try and promote her cleaning business. And then she ends up going to a house that reminds her of her past. And this is supposed to be a very nasty, disgusting horror novel. So the next two are kind of the same concept, but they're two completely different novels. The first is called The Hot Zone by Richard Peterson. This is a book that is supposed to be incredibly gross, but it's based on a true story, and it is actually about Ebola that suddenly appears in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. There's no cure, and within a few days, 90% of its victims are dead. So many people on Reddit said that this book was gory, incredibly disgusting, but extremely fascinating, because there's kind of this Contagion style horror novel, but it's 100% based on a true story. Like, this actually happened. Contagion storylines have always been fascinating for me, specifically in film. And then I also picked Infected by Scott Sigler. So this book is very similar to The Hot Zone, but this is not a nonfiction. So Infected is about a mysterious disease that's spreading across America that turns its victims into raving, paranoid murderers who inflict brutal horrors onto strangers, themselves, and even their own loved ones. So this is almost like World War Z meets Bird Box, which I really want to read also, but it's totally up my alley again. It's just Contagion horror. Is it weird to say that I have been interested in cannibalism? Basically, there's this novel, Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazarica, I think that's how you say it, which is basically about a future world where the animals transmit a disease that is ultimately fatal to humans. So instead, they decide to harvest meat from other humans in various different slaughterhouses. So it follows the story of one of the slaughterhouse managers or owners, and like what his life is like in this kind of scenario. It sounds like it's gonna challenge me. A lot of people said this book would make you not want to eat meat for weeks after, and so yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I think it would push the boundaries for me. The next one is also a cannibalism novel, but frighteningly, it is true. It's a true story. So this one's called A Miracle in the Andes by Nando Parado. This is, as I said, a true story, and it is a memoir that documents Nando Parado's perspective within a rugby team's survival after his airplane crashed in the Andes mountains. Him and the remaining survivors did have to eat the dead from this airplane crash, and it happened in 1972 in freezing conditions, and they were up there for like 2 months. I think that is what's fascinating, is like what humans would do for survival, and they're like doing the unthinkable, and I don't think I would be able to be strong enough mentally to do that. The last book I want to share with you, I haven't opened it, but I did actually buy this on Hell's Headbangers, and it is called Manhunter, the story of the Swedish occultist and serial killer Thurneman. So this is what the book looks like, and as I said, I did buy this like a year ago on Hell's Headbangers, and it's still in its packaging, and I just haven't haven't read it yet. So this is basically in the 1930s, there was a series of robbery murders in the Swedish town of Sala where the victims were either shot or gassed to death. When the perpetrators were caught, it turned out that they were part of a secret occult organization called the Magic Circle. The Sala Gang, as they were also known, was led by a charismatic hypnotist and serial killer who took on the name Thurneman, being an anagram for manhunter. So that is also up my alley. Just like many of the metal albums that we know and love, there's so many of them. Cough Cough, Cannibal Corpse, that are about serial killers. And I know that there's a lot of people that think, being fascinated with serial killers might be bad or taboo or whatever. I have not ever heard anything about this before, ever. So this is a totally new kind of case, I guess you could say, for me. Anyway, y'all, that is going to do it for all of the metal and horror novels that I want to read this year. Was there anything that kind of caught your eye, or have you read any of the books that I mentioned in this video? If there's anything else that you think would be kind of an interesting read for metal or horror, let me know down below in the comments, and also let me know, what's your New Year's resolution? What do you want to accomplish this year, big or small? Let me know down below. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, you guys.